Tadej Pogacar rescued his 2023 Il Lombardia campaign by relying on a strange concoction of cucumber, salt and vinegar to stave off late race muscle cramps.
It really helps.
Salt and vinegar?
Salt and vinegar, yeah.
So literally with salt in there with a little bit of vinegar?
Salt and vinegar, and I think
that helps you?
Cucumber or something.
Right.
What was this drink and how did it help him so much? Many cyclists and other endurance athletes suffer from muscle cramps during exercise, which limits their performance. These muscle cramps can continue after the end of training or competition and can even kick in, almost literally, at night time as well. And there is a ton of folklore out there as to what helps to prevent or minimize exercise-associated muscle cramps. There is the dehydration theory, which is that fluid loss causes muscle cramps, and therefore the solution would be to keep drinking plenty of water. However, I've heard a heat stress expert with a PhD discussing studies where athletes who have lost 2% of their body weight due to dehydration had no higher incidence of cramping than athletes that were maintaining their body weight due to ongoing fluid intake. The focus on high water intake during exercise can also lead to the risk of hyponatremia, which is essentially a low blood sodium concentration brought on by high intake of water, which can unfortunately be fatal. Next is the electrolyte concentration theory, which suggests that exercise-associated muscle cramps are caused by a reduction in sodium, potassium, magnesium, and other salts in the bloodstream, again, brought on by sweating. I've personally always tried to keep well hydrated during cycling and other endurance exercise. I've tried magnesium tablets and magnesium sprays, electrolyte gels, and a bunch of other tactics with mixed and unreliable success. But there is one thing that always helps me and always works for my muscle cramps. Let's have a look at the theory behind it. The most prevalent contemporary theory on exercise-associated muscle cramps is that they are due simply to fatigue, or more specifically, a level of sustained exertion which is over and above an athlete's regular training or competition loads. Thus, the correct answer to the question of how to minimize the likelihood and extent of muscle cramps during endurance exercise is get fitter. It seems that during extreme exercise, over time, with ongoing exertion and developing muscle fatigue, the motor nerves that supply the muscles become overexcitable and start to fire off unpredictably and in the absence of a command from the brain. This can continue after exercise and, unfortunately, even overnight. And it seems to be most prevalent in multi-joint, fast-twitch muscles, such as the gastrocnemius, which is the top part of the calf, the hamstrings, and the quadriceps. So if we know that there is a significant nerve-based component to the problem of muscle cramps, then it stands to reason that we need a neurological-based solution. And that's where the pickle juice comes in. In the mouth and the upper esophagus, there are receptors known as TRP, transient receptor potential channels. The components of pickle juice activate these receptors and have an inhibitory effect on the motor nerves, calming them down so that they are less likely to fire off. So I've talked about using pickle juice with many of my cycling buddies and also my physio clients, and I often get who wants to drink pickle juice? Well, actually the secret is you don't really have to drink it. Well, not much of it anyway. Once the pickle juice has come into contact with the receptors in the mouth, then the job is done. So simply swirling it around your mouth and spitting it out if you don't like the taste should work just fine. Think of it as a mouth rinse. And because it works on a rapid neural pathway, the effects should be almost instantaneous, i.e. within 90 seconds, rather than waiting 30 minutes or more for the pickle juice to be digested in the stomach. So what do I use? Well, my wife is German, and the German diet is very savoury and very salty. So we often have jars of pickle in brine sitting in the fridge. I'll sometimes drink this straight from the jar. However, I will get yelled at if I don't leave enough brine to cover the remaining pickles. I also keep a stash of Pickle Juice brand sports supplement drink. I buy the 120ml bottles, which normally last me about a week each. I'll swirl about a third of each bottle after a long ride, and I do 3 rides a week most weeks. Tellingly, I tested positive for COVID for the second time about 3 weeks ago, and because I was not feeling well, I've done very little training since then. Last week, 2 weeks after I tested positive, I started outdoor rides again, and on Sunday I did a relatively long and intense ride. It was 95 kilometres and it was in moderate heat of about 28 degrees. Even at my normal level of fitness and health, I would expect to have cramps after this type of ride. So in anticipation of this, when I got home, I had several swirls of pickle juice and I had absolutely no cramps at all. So back to Pogacar. I understand by perusing the interwebs that at Il Lombardia, he may have relied on a new product called Hot Shot, which, along with pickle brine, also contains a little bit of chili spice, which is another ingredient which activates those TRP pathways. So potentially that product covers a few extra anti-cramp bases. Given that I'm in Australia and Hot Shot only distributes to North America, I'll have to hunt a little harder to get hold of these, but I am keen to try them. In summary, of all the anti-cramp measures that you may have heard of, I know that pickle juice works for me. It has the most science to support it, and it is a relatively cheap and easy product to get hold of, and easy to carry with me on a long ride if needs be. Particularly as you only need enough for a few mouth swells. And the fact that I don't mind the taste, well, that's a bonus.